Hello students, a warm welcome to class 6. So I hope you all are fine, right? So today we'll be starting a new chapter that is from chapter 7, and that is called here Life in the Early Vedic Period. So without wasting any time, let us begin a new chapter. But before starting a new chapter, what we have to do, let us recap the previous chapter, what we have finished, right? So okay, this is the recap of the chapter, students. So we have finished about the Chinese civilizations. Okay, so this Chinese civilizations, it flourished on the banks of which river, students? Huangbo, the Yellow River. And why this river is called a river of sorrow, I've already explained this. I have already showed you the picture also last time. I hope you remember, right? So we have discussed about the features of the Chinese civilizations at that time. Yes or no? Okay, and we have discussed about society, right? So what was the position of the society at that time? Okay, we have discussed about the religion, the religious beliefs. So Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism played a very important role. Okay, the philosophers, we have talked about the philosophers, and his name was Confucius. Okay, here the spelling of Confucius is Confucius. Okay, so and his teachings we have studied, right? So in architectures, the most spectacular achievement in the architects in the field of architectures was what, students? Was the Great Wall of China, pagodas. Yes or no? Okay, so we have discussed about the terracotta army, which was built by whom? Qin Shi Huang. Okay, Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of China. Okay, we have discussed this one, and we have discussed about the economic life script, their script, the science and technology, okay, and the contributions. And we have discussed about sericulture or the silk farming. I hope you remember this. Okay, the sericulture or silk farming was first introduced by the wife of a Yellow emperor, and her name was what? I hope you remember her name, Ling Shi. Okay, so and we have discussed about the contributions of the Chinese civilizations. Okay, so this is the quick recap of the chapter of Chinese civilizations. Now let us begin the early Vedic period. Okay, let's start with the introduction. So let me read it out. So shortly after the decline of the Harappan civilization, a new inhabitants came to the northwestern side of India, and that is around 1500 BCE. Okay, and they were known as the Aryans. Okay, so students, so different scholars, okay, so they have different views regarding the original homeland of the Aryans. Okay, different scholars, they have different views from where the Aryans exactly came from. Okay, so the most accepted theory over here is that, or the fact is that, they came from the Central Asia. Okay, so the original home of the Aryans, we can say that it was the Central Asia. Okay, so the first batch of the Aryans, they came to settled, okay, they came to Punjab and they settled there. Okay, so they came perhaps in search of green pasture, students, okay, and the fertile lands to grow the crops. Okay, so they came with their families and they settled in the Midland country. That was the first batch of the Aryans that they came to Punjab and they settled there for the searching of green pastures and the fertile lands to grow the crops. Okay, and the second group of Aryans, they came. Okay, and the second group of Aryans, they came and they settled on the banks of the river Saraswati, Yamuna, and the Ganga Valley. Okay, and the main language, okay, is like Punjabi, Rajasthani, and the Eastern Hindi. Okay, so in the beginning, students, there was a great animosity, okay, between the Aryans. Okay, and those who had already settled as the time went by, okay, they become friends. Okay, there was a great animosity between the Aryans who came before and the Aryans who came later. Okay, so there was a great animosity, but afterwards, when the time went by, what happened is that they became friends, and slowly they formed the villages and the towns. Okay, slowly the towns and the villages were formed. Okay, so as we get to know about the Aryans from the Vedas, okay, which were verbally handed down the existence of the knowledge. Okay, so this was the brief introductions of the early Vedic period. Okay, now we'll be discussing about, okay students, now let us discuss about the Vedas. Okay, so the Vedas were written in the Sanskrit Okay, and it is one of the oldest books in the world. So by studying the Vedas, we come to know about the lifestyle of the Aryan students. Okay, so the term Veda is derived from the Sanskrit, which means knowledge. Okay, so they are the divine revelations, and it was handed down from what? Generation to generations and orally. Okay, so the Samhita referred to 4 Vedas. Okay, so there are 4 Vedas in early Vedic period, and that is the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. Okay, so the Vedas are believed to be a vibration in space. So there are altogether 1131 hymns. So 21 is there in Rig Veda, 101 in Yajur Veda, 1000 in Sama Veda, and 9 in Atharva Veda. So they were passed on through the oral traditions from father to son or from teacher to disciple. Okay, now let us discuss the Rig Vedic period. Now let us discuss the 4 Vedas one by one. That is Rig Vedic, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. So Rig Veda, students. Okay, so the Rig Veda is the oldest among all the Vedic literature. Okay, so it is the older of all the Vedas, and it was composed around 1500 BC. Okay, and this book consists of 1028 slokas, which were divided into 10 books. Okay, so we get to know in this Veda, in this book, that is Rig Veda, we get to know about the excuse me, political life, social, economic, and the religious life of the people of the early Vedic period. So we can also say that the Rig Vedic the Rig Veda, it gives us an insight, okay, into this political, social, economic, and religious life of the early Vedic period. Okay, now next one is your Sama Veda. So Sama Veda is a book of chants, chants, chants in the form of a music. So Sama, actually it means to bring shanti, okay, to the minds. So, and its main aim is to win our enemies with love. Okay, and Yajur Veda, it is a book of a sacrificial prayers. Okay, so this book, it contains the procedures to follow while performing the sacrifices, the rituals, the rites, and the ceremonies. Okay, so Yajur is derived from Yaj, okay, Y-A-J, Yaj, which means worship. And last one is here Atharva Veda. So Atharva Veda is, there was a sage by that name, okay, and the mantras. So Atharva Veda, actually it means a purohit, okay. So there was a sage by that name, and the mantras in the Atharva Veda were brought to prominence by the hymns. So the mantras are meant to ward off the evil and the difficulties in the life. Okay, so these are the 4 Vedas in the early Vedic period, and that is your Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, and your Atharva excuse me, and Atharva Veda. Okay, now we'll discuss about the features now, okay, of the early Vedic period, students, one by one. Okay, so now let's start with the features. That means let us start with the society first. Okay, so let me read it out first. The Aryan society was divided into 4 classes of varnas. There were Brahmanas, there were Kshatriyas, there were Vaishyas, and there were Sudras. Okay, so Brahmanas, students. Okay, so the Aryan society at the time was divided into 4 classes, or the varnas. Okay, so the word varna was used to refer to a different occupational group. Okay, so they were in fact an occupational groups which were formed by the people, okay, on the basis of their skills or their work. Okay, now let us discuss the 4 varnas, students. Okay, so they are Brahmanas. So Brahmanas, okay, that is the highest rank in the society. So the Brahmins, okay, were the learned people. Okay, the Brahmanas, okay, that means the Brahmins are the priests. Okay, they were the learned people, and they were the one who performed the religious ceremonies and the prayers. Okay, and they are the one who impart the educations. Okay, so the Brahmins or the priests they performed the religious ceremonies and they performed the prayers and imparted the educations. Okay, so that is number one. So they are they belong to the highest class, that means the Brahmins or the Brahmanas. Number two is the Kshatriyas. Okay, so the Kshatriyas were the warrior class students, okay, so who fought and protected the tribe, okay, and land from the danger. Okay, or also we can also say that the Kshatriyas, the warriors, also fought wars and protected the tribe. Okay, so next one is the Vaishyas. So the Vaishyas, they carried on agriculture. So they come in the third positions. Okay, so they were the Vaishyas were the artisans, agriculturists, traders, okay, producing goods for the society. Okay, so they come in the third position. And last one is your Sudras. So Sudras comprising the Dasas, they were the laborers. Okay, so they were the last one. Okay, so and they did the menial jobs. Okay, and they were the dark skinned original inhabitants. Okay, so this system was very flexible and there was no restrictions with regard to occupations, intermarriage and interdining between these classes. Okay, so a Rig Vedic verse, it says that I am a poet, my father is a doctor, and my mother is a grinder of corn. Okay, so this verse, it points out that, or it says that there were no restrictions as far as the occupations were concerned. Okay, so now let me show you the picture of the positions of the society. So Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Sudras. Okay, so the Brahmanas were the Brahmins or the priests who performed the religious sacrifices. Okay, so next one is here the Kshatriyas or the warriors. Okay, and who they were the warrior class who fought wars and protected the tribes from danger. Next one is the Vaishyas. They carried on agriculture, industries, and the trade, that means the merchants. Okay, and they belong in the third position. And last one is the Sudras. Okay, mostly comprising of the Dasas, and they were the laborers, and they mostly do the menial jobs. Okay, and they were dark skinned original inhabitants. Okay, and it is very interesting to note that, students, that this division was not based on birth. Okay, but this division, it is based on occupation. Okay, so now let us discuss about the social life. Okay, so let me read it out. The Aryan Skula were the joint families, so they were patriarchal in nature. Okay, the oldest male member, that means generally a grandfather or father, was the head of the family. Okay, so we can say that the family, okay, students, the family were the primary unit of this close-knit system. Okay, so the oldest male member, generally a grandfather or the father, he was the head of the family. Okay, and he usually made all the decisions. Okay, the head of the family made what? They made usually all the decisions. Okay, so he was called the Grihapati. Okay, so and it was his duty to look after the family member. It was the duty of the Grihapati, okay, the head of the family, okay, to look after their family members. Okay, as it was a patriarchal society. Okay, the society at that time was patriarchal. Okay, so women were held in respect at the time. Okay, so it was a patriarchal society and he usually make all the decisions as well. Okay, so women also, they were held in respect. Okay, and they participated in what? They participated in yajnas. Okay, so along with the husband. Okay, so many learned women attended the assemblies. Okay, they participated in debates and they also composed hymns. Okay, so besides of that, they also enjoyed the rights, the women, okay, the women during the time of early Vedic period we are talking about. Okay, so they also enjoyed the right to choose their husbands in a special ceremony, and that is called Swayambara. Okay, in early Vedic period, students. So there was no child marriage, and widows that were allowed, okay, to remarry. Okay, so there was no child marriage and widows were allowed to remarry at that time. Okay, that means the women at that time in the early Vedic period were held in respect, and they participated in mostly in various yajnas with their husband. Okay. Okay, now next feature is your dress and ornaments. So students, at the time, the people in the early Vedic period, the dress were their dress was very similar to that of the Harappans. I hope you remember. Okay, I've explained you the dress and ornaments, what they used to wear. Okay, like what kind of ornaments they used to wear. Okay, in this valley civilization, I've already explained to you. Okay, so and the people like the people of the early Vedic period also, their dress was very similar to that of the Harappans. Okay, so the men, okay, in the early Vedic period, they wore a dhoti. Okay, they used to wear a dhoti and a piece of cloth over their shoulders. Okay, and they also tied the turbans around their heads. Okay, the women's then wore a sari and an upper garment. Okay, woven from the wool. Okay, so both men and women were very fond of ornaments, and they were made up of, and those ornaments, it was made from the gold, silver and the other metals. Okay, so this is now the features of your early Vedic period. Okay, students, the next one is your amusements. Okay, so the Aryans were very fond of outdoor life. Okay, and they were very fun loving people. Okay, and their favorite pastimes, it includes music, okay, dancing, chariot racing, hunting. They used to do hunting. Okay, they used to do gambling. Okay, and dice. Okay, besides of that, they used to play the flute, and the drums were also used for the music. Okay, flute and drums were used for the music. Okay, so we can say that the Aryans were very fond of their outdoor life. Okay, so this is the amusements of, and this is the another features of your early Vedic period. Okay, now okay, students, now next feature is your religion. Okay, so in the early Vedic period, people personified the forces of nature and worshipped them as gods and goddesses. Okay, so gods and goddesses such as Vayu, which is known as wind, Indra, rain, Surya, sun, and Varun, sky. Okay, so the Aryans at the time, students, they were a very religious people. Okay, they used to worship the forces of nature. Okay, and they used to worship various gods and goddesses, such as Vayu, Indra, excuse me, Surya, and Varun. Okay, and the most important god was the Indra. Okay, and next was your Agni. Okay, as Surya was the sun god and Agni was the god of fire. Okay, to whom all the offerings were made. Okay, and they also used to worship Usha. Okay, excuse me, Usha was the goddess of the dawn, Dawn. Okay, as Indra was the most important god, as he was the god of rain and war. Okay, who led to the Aryan armies to victory. Okay, and they also worshipped Yama, and Yama was the god of death. Okay, so there were no temples or image worship at the time, students. Okay, so the Aryans, they worshipped in the open excuse me, open offerings. They offering sacrifices and singing the hymns in praise of the elements such as earth, fire, water, air, and sky. Why? To get the earthly happiness and success in the battle. Okay, so the whole family, students, they took part in such a simple yajnas, okay, wherein they offered milk, ghee, and grain to the gods. Okay, they offered what? Milk, ghee and grain to the gods. Okay, so this was the religious life of the early Vedic period. Okay, so they mostly worship the gods such as Surya, Usha, okay, Agni, Vayu, Indra, okay. They even worship Varuna and they even worship Yama as the god of death. Okay, I hope it's clear, right? Now, next feature is, okay, students, the next feature is your economic life. Okay, so agriculture and cattle rearing, okay, it was the main occupations of the people of the early Aryans. Okay, and the crops like barley, wheat, rice, fruits and vegetables were grown. Okay, and they were mainly dependent on rains for the irrigation, students. Okay, and besides of that, there were animals which was been domesticated. Okay, and animals such as cows, horses, dogs, goats and auctions. Okay, they were domesticated. Okay, and besides of that, the cow was considered very, very valuable, students. Okay, and it was a sign of prosperity. Okay, the Aryans, they introduced the horse in India from the Central Asia. Okay, horses were used to draw the chariots for the Rajan. So horses was mainly used, or it was mainly used to draw what, students? Chariots. Okay, so Ghoda Gadi, students, for the Rajan and the nobles. Okay, and they were greatly valued. Okay, so horses were used extensively in warfare as well. Okay, so next one is your hunting, pottery, spinning. Okay, pottery, spinning, metallurgy such as copper and bronze and leather crafting were also the other important occupations of the people of the early Vedic age. Okay, and next one is your shipping was also very, very limited to the navigation of the rivers for the inland trade. Okay, and gold was at the time, okay, so gold and auction were mainly carried on land, and mainly it was done through the barter system. Okay, and the people at the time, they were they are also very familiar with the sea trade. Okay, so the meaning of barter is, students, to exchange the good, okay, to exchange good services, okay, without using the money. That means to exchange goods and to, okay, to exchange goods and services without using the money. Okay, so that is the meaning of barter system. Okay, I hope it's clear. Okay, so this is the economic life of the early Vedic age. Okay, now next one is your political life. Political life of the early Vedic age. Okay, so let me read it out. The Aryans gave up the nomadic life and settled down into many tribes, and it was known as Janas, and the land where they settled was called Janapadas. Many yajnas or sacrifices were performed for obtaining the cattle. Okay, so students, the Aryans, okay, so the Aryans were organized into many tribes. Okay, so the Aryans, they gave up their nomadic life and they settled down in many tribes. Okay, and it is known as Janas. Okay, and the land where they settled was called Janapadas. Okay, these tribes, okay, these tribes were constantly involved in the battle with one another to protect their cattle. Okay, so because cattle was considered to be a wealth in the early Vedic period. Okay, so each tribe, okay, it was divided into a number of small units at that time, students, and that was called gramas. Okay, so each tribe, I'm repeating it again, each tribe was divided into a number of small units called gramas, and which comprised the number of families living in villages. Okay, and each family at that time was headed by Gramini. Okay, so the families living together in a village were formed of a clan or a wish. Okay, so each tribe had a king, okay, who was selected on the basis of his leadership qualities and his physical strength. Okay, and the king was the protector of his tribe and ruled according to the wishes of his tribe. Besides of that, he was also offered prayer to God on behalf of the tribe. Okay, I hope it's clear. Okay, so now let's talk about the ministers, officials and advisors at the time. Okay, so the king or the Rajan's students, okay, the king or the Rajan was assisted, okay, it was assisted by a ministers, advisors and officials in charge of his duties. Okay, over here we can say that each tribe has a chieftain, and chieftain is called Rajan. Okay, that means Raja, who was chosen for his wisdom and courage. Okay, and his main function was to protect the tribe from external attacks, and his main work is to maintain law and order also. Okay, so for his service, the people had a voluntary contributions of gifts. Okay, so a Rajan could be removed from power if he has, or if he was inefficient or cruel. Okay, he can be removed from the power if he was very cruel, if he behave in an inefficient manner. Okay, so he was helped by a large number of officials in the work of the administration, such as ministers. Okay, he have ministers, he have advisors, he have large number of officials who help him in his work of administrations. Okay, so the king or the Rajan, he was assisted by a ministers, he was assisted by the advisors and the officials in charge of his duties. Okay, the chief among them was the Purohita. Okay, so Purohita is the one who advised Rajan. Purohita given advice to whom? To Rajan in religious matter and in moral issues. Okay, so Purohita advised Rajan in religious matters and the moral issues. Okay, and next to him was the Senani. There comes, okay, after Purohita there comes the Senani. So Senani was the head of the army. Okay, and he assists Rajan in warfare, students. Okay, Warfare. Okay, and after Senani there comes a Gramini. Okay, so Gramini was the village headsman, okay, or village headman. Okay, so who helped the Rajan, or who helped the king for looking after the affairs of the village. Okay, so besides of that, there is also a reference to the two tribal assemblies, and the two tribal assemblies named is Sabha and Samiti. And Sabha and Samiti are the one who check the power of the king, and they are also the one who advise him, that means who advise Rajan on all the important matters. Okay, so both of these are the two tribal assemblies, and they checked what? They checked the power of the king, and they also advise him on all the important matters as well. Okay, I hope it's very, very clear, right? So this is the political life of the early Vedic age. Okay, now let us see the contributions, okay, of the early Vedic period. Okay, so let me read it out first. The knowledge of the architectures that existed in the Vedic age from oral traditions. It was recorded in the Sanskrit mantras and compiled under the title Vastu Shastra. So these days, designers and architects are also increasingly, they were using Vastu Shastra for a healthy and a prosperous life. Okay, so students, the most important contributions, okay, of the early Vedic period or of this time was Vastu Shastra. Okay, so this Vastu Shastra, it was gradually recorded in Sanskrit mantras. Okay, and it was compiled under the title named Vastu Shastra. Okay, so this Vastu Shastra, it is possibly the oldest known architectural treatise in the world today. Okay, so this Vastu Shastra is the oldest known architectural treatise in the world today. Okay, so the earliest known master of the Vastu Shastra, okay, name was Maya Danava. Okay, so Maya Danava, okay, he was the founder of this tradition, okay, of this tradition named Vastu Shastra. Okay, he was the founder, and his name is Maya Danava. Okay, so nowadays, these days, designers, the architects, they are using what? Okay, they are increasingly using Vastu Shastra. Okay, why they use Vastu Shastra? For a healthy and a prosperous life. Okay, so this Vastu Shastra, it combines the 5 different elements, students. Okay, namely air, water, fire, earth, and space. Okay, so these are the 5 different elements. I'm repeating it again: air, water, fire, earth, and space. Okay, so they use these 5 elements. It is combined of 5 different elements, and these are mostly used to send out the positive energies. Okay, to send out the positive energies and to bring about a harmonious and a balanced growth between whom? Between the humans and their natural environment. Okay, so these are the contributions of the early Vedic period. Okay, I hope it makes you much clear, right? If you have any doubts, please let me know. Okay, in the next online classes, please do let me know if you have any doubts, if you have any problems. We'll discuss it in the online classes. Okay, students, so thank you, take care, bye bye.